anything like this, these complicated machines and cog devices and stuff. And things like this too, which is at Dendera. This is totally authentic. You have these cables coming out of this thing. They're attached to this some kind of device. It looks like some kind of light bulb. You have the serpent here as like a filament. These are Jed columns associated with Osiris. You have some baboon Thoth god here with a knife. You have these mini guys here doing stuff. I mean, this whole scene is pretty bizarre, and it seems to depict an electrical device. And this is completely real. So mainstream archaeologists have to explain this too. There has to be an explanation, and it can't be that it's an electrical device, because ancient time, well, they didn't have electricity, so it has to be something else. Here's their explanation. This is a lotus flower here, and this is the aroma of the flower. That's the explanation. Also, now at the Abydos temple, which is nearby, up on this high lintel, which is about 40 feet off the ground, is these things carved into it, and this is totally real too. Something that looks like a helicopter, other things here that look like submarines. There's something here that looks like a jet. This also looks like some kind of jet here. This is completely real. And now the mainstream has to explain this too. And their explanation, which is not a bad one actually, is that these things is that two hieroglyphs are superimposed on each other. And there was a hieroglyph there, and then after 1,000 years, the priest came and they chiseled another hieroglyph on it, and they plastered it up, but then that plaster fell down. So it's two hieroglyphs together. And that does explain a couple of them, but I've been told by Egyptologists that this one here, that looks like this little jet plane, that they don't have an explanation for that one. That's not any hieroglyph they know or see. It's unique. So yeah, the whole idea of flight that people had. I mean, and just like today, we have spaceships, we have airplanes, but we still have ships. Most cargo is still trafficked by ship across oceans. And we have this thing from Panama. This is also what it's called a zoomorphic glyph. It's about a 4-inch long gold pendant. But it seems to be, it's like a monster, but it seems to be a backhoe. It's like heavy equipment. And it has a stone on it. He's got a breastplate in the front of him. But it's this whole part back here. So it's called a zoomorphic glyph in the sense that it's like heavy machinery, some kind of backhoe or something, but it's been turned into essentially a monster, which then became a piece of jewelry. They found things in tombs. This is actually a thing from the Dasani Monastery, ancient Chinese records. They have stories of flight. The Kebra Nagast, which is from Ethiopia, also has stories of King Solomon and his son flying between Israel and Ethiopia and things like that. And of course, the whole thing of these flying discs. Discs that are made to fly through the air, and then here you have these guys on it. And I can see that, yep, my time is up, so I'm going to end it right there. And thanks, everybody.
I read Sitchin's book, The 12th Planet, in 1990, and that was another incredible awakening experience. I then went to Wendell Stevens' International UFO Conference in Tucson, met Bill Cooper, who was still alive at that time, met William Bramley, who had just published The Gods of Eden, another really interesting UFO book. But it was primarily Sitchin's 12th Planet that got me going on this whole line of research that we're going to explore now. As many of you probably recall, in that book, Sitchin had reinterpreted ancient Sumerian myth, focusing in particular on this story here of a planet called Marduk in its attack or its confrontation with another world called Tiamat. And in the Sumerian creation myth, we're told that Mounted on his terrible chariot and turbaned with terrifying auras, Marduk confronted Tiamat. And as a result of this confrontation, Tiamat was split in half. In fact, Sitchin tells us, and here's another depiction of Marduk chasing or riding upon Tiamat, who's portrayed not as an orb or a planet, but rather as a watery dragon or a serpent. Sitchin tells us that as a result of this confrontation, Tiamat was split in half. And one half of Tiamat became the asteroid belt circling the sun between Mars and Jupiter. The other half of Tiamat became Earth. To cite Sitchin, he says that Earth is Tiamat reincarnated. And he goes on to suggest that it's possible that Tiamat was in fact an inhabited world. So I pulled this Finlandia ad up here. It says, in a past life I lived in Atlantis and you thought the Titanic was a disaster. And here we see this broken goddess on the shore. And the broken goddess is Tiamat, who later becomes called Gaia, or Sophia, the earth itself. Well, the interesting thing about this is the original bedrock story that becomes so familiar to storytellers and those who read myths and legends, the story of the dragon. And here we see a female who has control of this dragon, obviously representing Tiamat herself, this great heavenly goddess. In myth, the dragon is the guardian of treasure. And if you can get past the dragon, outwit the dragon, you have access to this tremendous treasure, which could even be a cosmic treasure. It's because of this treasure that I feel that so many legends surround this whole serpent idea, and the reason why we're raised to be afraid of the serpent. But yet then we're confronted with stories such as Moses, who lifted the serpent of healing. When Moses lifts that serpent of healing, he's doing exactly what the Egyptians said Osiris did. The Osiris pillar, lifting the serpent. And I believe that the Moses story is a derivative of the original Osiris story. Here we see Jason of the Golden Fleece fame being spit from the mouth of the serpent while the goddess Athena supervises this maneuver. And then later in medieval Christian art, they portray Jesus using a pillar or cross to open the mouth of something called the Leviathan, which is obviously being portrayed as the open mouth of a serpent, but in my terminology, it would actually be a wormhole.